quick question. If you somehow ended up in medieval Europe, what do you think would happen to you? Most people assume they'd be a peasant, struggling in a field somewhere, confused, cold, and extremely tired. But here's the thing. You might actually be more useful than you think. Not because you're special, because you already know things that back then basically didn't exist. Let's go through them one by one. First one, you can read. Right now that sounds like nothing. Everyone can read. It's a basic requirement to function in modern life. In medieval Europe, somewhere between 5 and 15% of the population could read, depending on where you were and when. Most people couldn't. Not because they were less intelligent, because books were absurdly expensive, schools barely existed outside of monasteries, and honestly, if you're working in a field from age 6, there's not a lot of time for literacy. So if you showed up knowing how to read, you'd immediately be in a very small, very valued group. Clergy, scholars, scribes, people who actually ran things. You could work for a lord, a merchant, a court. You'd have options that literally 90% of the population didn't have. And here's the wild part. You probably don't even remember learning to read. You just can. It happened somewhere around age 5, and you've never thought about it since. That skill alone might have changed your entire social class in the medieval world, without doing anything else. Just by being able to look at a document and understand what it says. Congratulations on your accidental elite status. Second one, you speak more than one language. Do you know any English? You're already listening to this in it, so yes, you do. Did you study any other language at school? Even badly? Even just enough to order food or ask where the bathroom is in another country? In medieval Europe, knowing multiple languages was genuinely rare and extremely valuable. Trade routes ran across language barriers constantly. Diplomacy required translators. Courts needed people who could communicate with foreign merchants or visiting nobles without everything getting lost in translation. If you know even basic French, Spanish, German, or really anything beyond your local dialect, you'd be in demand in ways most people around you simply weren't. And the thing is, you probably know more than you think. You've seen enough foreign films, played enough games with non-English dialogue, scrolled through enough content in other languages that some of it stuck whether you tried or not. If you're actually fluent in something, you're a professional asset. Permanently employed. Someone's going to pay you well to just stand in a room and translate things. Third one, you can do basic math, not advanced math, not calculus, not anything that would require a calculator. Just adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, maybe percentages, maybe knowing roughly what a 10% discount looks like without having to think too hard. This is going to sound ridiculous, but formal arithmetic was not a widely held skill in medieval Europe. Roman numerals were still in use in parts of Europe well into the medieval period, and doing calculations with Roman numerals is genuinely painful compared to the number system you grew up with. Try multiplying XL7 by XX13 in your head. That's 47 times 23. You do it in about 10 seconds with the system you use. With Roman numerals, you're in trouble. If you understand how percentages work, how to calculate a profit margin, how to figure out what someone owes you after a trade, you'd be immediately useful to merchants, tax collectors, and estate managers. You'd basically be a human calculator in an era before calculators existed. Which sounds simple, but it's exactly as valuable as it sounds. Fourth one, you can draw, or you have any sense of visual design. Can you sketch something recognizable? Can you lay out information in a way that makes sense visually? Do you just have a general sense of what looks good and what doesn't? Illustration in medieval Europe was done by a tiny number of specialized artists, mostly working for the church or wealthy patrons. Illuminated manuscripts, church decorations, maps, illustrated documents, all of it required skilled people who were in very short supply. If you can draw at a competent level, even without being a professional, you'd stand out. And here's the thing nobody talks about. You've spent your entire life surrounded by intentional visual design. Every app, every website, every logo, every package in a grocery store was designed by someone. You've absorbed decades of visual language without realizing it. That intuition for what works visually, for hierarchy, for balance, for what draws the eye where it should go. That's not nothing. That's actually a trained sense, and you got it for free just by existing in the modern world. You wouldn't be using any modern software, but you'd still have an eye that most people around you simply didn't have. Fifth one, basic first aid. Okay, this one is genuinely important. Medieval medicine was not great. This is an understatement. People died from infections that today would be handled with a basic antibiotic in about a week. Wound care was largely ineffective. Bloodletting was considered a legitimate treatment for almost everything. The germ theory of disease did not exist, would not exist for centuries, and the idea that invisible tiny things were making you sick would have sounded completely insane. If you know that wounds need to be cleaned before being bandaged. If you understand that washing your hands before touching an open injury matters. If you know how to apply pressure to stop bleeding, or recognize that a fever going too high for too long is a sign that something is seriously wrong. You would be saving lives with information that feels completely obvious to you. You wouldn't need a medical degree. You just need to know the things that everyone knows now, because they've been common knowledge for 100 years. That kind of useful gets you a permanent position in a household that can afford to keep you around. You'd be valued, protected, and fed, which in medieval terms is actually a pretty solid deal. Sixth one, you can swim. This one surprises people every time. Swimming was not a common skill in medieval Europe. Most people couldn't swim, including soldiers, including sailors. The sea and rivers were something you crossed by boat, not something you moved through yourself. There's historical evidence that many medieval people, including some who spent their entire lives near water, simply never learned. Part of it was cultural. Part of it was that falling into deep water was so often fatal that people developed a kind of fatalistic relationship with it, rather than trying to address the actual problem. If you can swim, not even well, just well enough to not immediately drown, you'd have a skill that knights and sailors often didn't. Which is a genuinely strange sentence, but here we are. Seventh one. You know where things are in the world. Where's China? Where's Africa? What's the rough shape of Europe? Where does the sun rise and set? Medieval geographic knowledge was limited and patchy for most people. Maps existed, but were often wildly inaccurate, sometimes intentionally spiritual rather than geographic. Most people had a working knowledge of maybe a few days' travel from where they were born, and essentially nothing beyond that. You grew up seeing maps of the entire world constantly, on screens, in textbooks, on walls, in games. You have a rough mental model of where continents are, where major regions sit, how trade routes might logically run between places. That spatial awareness of the world was genuinely extraordinary. Explorers were celebrated and richly funded, partly because almost nobody knew what was out there. You already know, casually, without thinking about it. You could tell someone roughly how far away China is from Europe and what direction to go. That information alone could be worth money in the right context. Eighth one, you can type on a keyboard really fast. Okay, this one is completely, totally, hilariously useless. There are no keyboards. There is no electricity. There are no computers. There is nothing that your typing speed can be applied to in any way whatsoever. Your single fastest modern skill has zero applications in the medieval period. Congratulations on your extremely precise fingers that help absolutely nobody. Although, if you think about it for a second, the dexterity, the hand-eye coordination, the ability to work quickly and accurately with your hands at sustained speed, those things do translate in general. Scribes valued precision, artisans valued dexterity, surgeons, such as they were, valued steady hands. So maybe your keyboard speed is vaguely useful after all, just completely unrecognizably so. You'd be the fastest quill writer in the county and have no idea why your hands are so naturally good at it. Ninth one. You understand how electricity works. Not at an engineering level, just basic, vague, high school level understanding. You know that lightning is electricity. You know that electricity is a physical phenomenon and not a supernatural one. You understand at a conceptual level that electrical current exists, that it can be generated from movement or heat, that it can be stored and controlled. In the medieval period, lightning was understood as an act of divine power, not metaphorically, literally. It was God expressing something through electricity directly at the earth. If you casually explain that lightning is actually a discharge of electrical charge between clouds and the ground, a natural physical process that in principle could be understood and eventually harnessed, the people around you would not respond by saying, "Wow, interesting scientific hypothesis, let's investigate further." They would look at you and process the fact that you have knowledge about divine power that nobody else around you possesses. Depending on who you said it to, This could make you a respected and slightly feared scholar, or it could start a conversation with religious authorities that you would very much prefer not to have. Best to maybe lead with the swimming. Demonstrate that you can do something impressive, build some goodwill, and then quietly keep the electricity knowledge to yourself until you have a better read on the room. So let's add this up. You can read. You probably know at least one other language. You can do math that most people around you can't. You have visual instincts from a lifetime of designed environments. You know basic medical information that will actually save lives. You can swim. You have a rough global map in your head, and you understand at least conceptually how the physical world actually works at a level that nobody around you does. None of this makes you exceptional by the standards of where you live right now, but none of it was normal back then. You'd show up in medieval Europe thinking you were completely unprepared, and you'd actually be carrying a collection of skills that most people around you had never encountered in any single person. The question is, which one you'd lead with? Reading and math for the merchant route, first aid for the healer route, languages for the diplomat route, swimming for the impressive party trick route, or just immediately explain electricity and see what happens. I'd try the swimming first, lowest stakes, most visually impressive. Everyone gets to go home that day. Which skill do you think would actually be your most useful one? Drop it in the comments.